So yesterday was like a really great day. So we are starting today and we just had breakfast. But yesterday was a really great day. So we're actually going to do this in like 2 parts because we just did a lot. So this group really kind of needed a good day because the previous day was a lot of travel. Had that long ferry ride. Some of our buddies, their bags got left, so they had to deal with that. And anyways, it was just kind of a longer day, so we were just kind of looking forward to the next day. And yesterday was awesome because we actually got to like work with some beekeepers and go to their apiaries and do all this stuff, because everybody on this group from Canada, the US, Hungary, Slovenia, Germany, England, everybody here, we're all like beekeepers and we all like want to see bees and learn about bees. So we got to go to like 2 different beekeepers' bee yards yesterday. So we left the hotel, had breakfast, left the hotel, and like drove on the bus for a little while. We drove, like, it was like beautiful driving. We drove past these windmills. They're all over the place up here. So we're just a reminder, we're in Denmark now, and we're driving past all these windmills, driving past these fields. There's like deer in the fields. There's reindeer up here too, which is kind of cool. So we get to this guy named Frank's house, and Frank is a beekeeper. He has about 100 hives. He does it part-time. He sells like 50 nukes a year. And he's a really large beekeeper for Denmark with 100 hives. They wouldn't describe him as commercial, but he sells honey in drums, basically. So he produces enough honey to sell honey in drums. So we got to go to his house, and his house is like awesome. This house and his bee yard and his honey shop and everything, it's like really incredible. So we got to go to his house, and it is like the secret garden. Like, his wife has like decorated this place really well, and she does these like really, like, she doesn't really throw anything away. Like, there was these old, like, I don't know what kind of hives they are, but these big old cabinet hives, and they had turned one into like a flower planter there's like flowers and leaves like pouring out of it, and it looks awesome. And then they took an old extractor that they didn't use anymore, and they like set that into the woods, and like plants are growing out of it, and it looks great. There's this like path that you have to walk through, and it's like green on either side, and there's like this canopy, and it like opens up into the apiary, and it just was like absolutely beautiful. This whole space was like awesome. And we get there, and she's made coffee. She's made a couple different types of like biscuits. Like, they're not like super flaky American biscuits like we think, but they're like biscuits. So then they had all their honey spread out, and they had a whole bunch of mead spread out, and we all like ate that. So we had biscuits, had coffee, and they kind of did this introduction and gave us a tour of their honey house. So like the wife, like, she makes pottery. So we got to go, like, she had like a big kiln, or she had 2 big kilns there, and all her pottery. He does most of the beekeeping, and she does some of the beekeeping. Got to see his honey house and his big extractor, and he has this specialized extractor that looks like a radial extractor, but it's actually tangential because the honey is so thick. He was actually in the middle of processing honey, so he had stacks of boxes with honey frames all stacked up on one side of the room, and then an extractor, and then his capping machine, and he had his sump pump and his cappings and a strainer and a settling tank. He had all that set up in the room. So we got to see all that. We were kind of joking, like, do you want some help? Like, our group of 40 people can knock out the rest of your like 400 frames and extract these in an hour. So we were just kind of joking about that because he was obviously in the middle of working, and he had cleaned up his shop for us. So we learned that there's like 3 types of honey that they produce here. There's like a spring, a summer, and like a late summer. And we got to taste all of that and experience all of that. That was pretty great. They turned one of those hives, those old hives that they don't use anymore, they turned it into like an honesty box. So we opened it up, and we could see like all the different honeys there. And like none of us had like any euros or any kronas to pay for it all. So they just basically took our names, took down a list, and we're just going to pay them for honey later, which is great. So I got 4 different honeys to bring back to the States, and they're all from the same area, but they're all very different. One of them is like Christmas white, which is really cool. So we got to go open up his hives. He took us out to his bee yard, and we opened up the hives and checked those out. He said that like it's a bad year when he loses 4% of his hives. He has a very low mite load, basically. Like, he doesn't really worry about mites. He does treat with formic, and then he does do an oxalic acid dribble in the winter. But he said he really has to think about his beekeeping when he has 15% losses over the winter. And he's like, if I have 15% losses, I really need to do some thinking because I'm probably doing something wrong. And he kind of attributed it to the fact there's not a lot of beekeepers in the area. So because of that, there's just not a lot of bees moving around. There's just not a lot of new beekeepers coming in. So he says it's just because there's not a lot of bees, there's just not a lot of mites in the area. So he likes it, but he does treat. He doesn't check his for mites, but he just treats for formic and treats with OA dribble every single year, and that's like his style of beekeeping. It was great, and his bees were buckfast bees. That's the type that he likes there. And he is, just a happy beekeeper. He's obviously a very like good beekeeper. This other beekeeper that we worked with later in the day, he was like, they're friends. He's like, Frank is a really, really, really great beekeeper. One day I'd like to, beekeep as well as he does. And you could tell, like, their whole place was like really, really methodical, really well done. They had like these planters with gardens and flowers blooming and all kinds of bees on them, which was great. They had this really cool thing in the ground where they had these glass jars that they had flipped over and put in the ground into a hexagon, and it just looked great. It was just a nice way to spend the morning and a couple hours, taste some mead, eat biscuits, eat honey, all that kind of stuff. So that was just a really good day. We just really needed something like that, something with real beekeepers, where you walk into a honey room and there's bees flying up in the ceiling. It smells like honey. Walk into another room and it smells like brood frames. So it was just a good day. And we left there. We continued on with the rest of the day. And I'll tell you about that, but I got to split this into 2 videos because there's just a lot to talk about.